Have you ever felt that moment when everything in your life suddenly clicks into place? When years of struggle, sacrifice, and determination finally pay off in one life-changing instant? That's exactly what happened to Marcus Johnson on a crisp October morning in 2023, standing in his family's crammed Chicago apartment, holding a letter that would change everything. But before we dive into this incredible story of dreams shattered and mysteriously restored, I need you to do me a favor. If you're someone who believes in the power of hope, in the idea that sometimes help comes from the most unexpected places, hit that subscribe button right now. This story will take you on an emotional roller coaster that you won't want to miss. And trust me, you want to be notified when stories like this drop. Ring that notification bell too, because what you're about to hear will restore your faith in humanity. Marcus Johnson was 17 years old, the youngest of 3 children in a household where every dollar was counted twice. His mother, Sandra, worked double shifts at a local diner while studying for her nursing degree at night. His father had left when Marcus was 12, leaving behind nothing but broken promises and unpaid bills. In the Johnson household, dreams were luxuries they couldn't afford, but education, that was their lifeline out of poverty. Standing 6 feet 2 inches with callous hands from his part-time job at a local grocery store, Marcus had learned early that nothing came easy. While his classmates at Roosevelt High School worried about prom dates and weekend parties, Marcus was calculating whether his family could afford both groceries and his school supplies for the month. But despite the circumstances, or perhaps because of them, Marcus possessed something that couldn't be taught: an unwavering determination to succeed. His grades weren't just good, they were exceptional. A 4.2 GPA despite working 20 hours a week, despite studying by the light of his phone when the electricity got cut off, despite falling asleep over textbooks worn thin from years of use at the public library. His teachers often marveled at his ability to grasp complex mathematical concepts and his natural leadership skills that emerged whenever group projects were assigned. But it wasn't just academics where Marcus excelled. He had discovered basketball in 8th grade, not at some elite youth league, but shooting hoops at a community center with a rim that hung crooked and a backboard covered in graffiti. By his junior year, he was leading Roosevelt High's basketball team to their first district championship in over a decade. College scouts had started taking notice, but Marcus knew that athletic scholarships were uncertain. One injury, one bad game, and everything could disappear. That's why when his guidance counselor, Mrs. Patterson, called him into her office on that October morning, Marcus felt his stomach clench with familiar anxiety. Mrs. Patterson was a woman in her 50s who had seen hundreds of students cycle through Roosevelt High, most of them carrying the same weight of financial struggle that Marcus knew all too well. She had always been in his corner, spending her own money on college application fees and staying late to help him perfect his essays. "Marcus, I need you to sit down," she said, her voice carrying an unusual tremor of excitement. "I've been working on something for months, and I think I have news that's going to change your life." The office was small, cramped with filing cabinets and college brochures that promoted schools Marcus had only dreamed of attending. The smell of coffee and copy machine toner filled the air as Mrs. Patterson pulled out a thick manila envelope from her desk drawer. Her hands were actually shaking as she held it. "The Blackstone Foundation Scholarship," she began, her eyes bright with anticipation. "It's a full-ride scholarship program for academically gifted students from underserved communities. Full tuition, room and board, even a monthly stipend for personal expenses. Marcus, I submitted your application 6 months ago, and this morning—" She paused, allowing the suspense to build. "This morning, I received confirmation that you've been selected as one of only 20 recipients nationwide." The words hit Marcus like a physical force. Full ride, everything covered, monthly stipend. He felt the room spin slightly as the implications crashed over him in waves. No more working nights at the grocery store. No more choosing between textbooks and food. No more watching his mother count and recount crumpled bills on the kitchen table. "Are you serious?" The words came out as barely more than a whisper. Mrs. Patterson's smile could have powered the entire school building. "Marcus, you're going to Northwestern University. Everything paid for. For years of freedom to focus entirely on your education and your future. Northwestern University." Marcus had walked past their campus during a summer job in Evanston, pressing his face against the gates and wondering what it would be like to belong somewhere like that. The Gothic architecture, the manicured lawns, the students who moved with the confidence of people who had never worried about their next meal. And now it was going to be his home. The scholarship letter itself was printed on thick, expensive paper that felt substantial in his hands. The Blackstone Foundation logo was embossed in gold, and every word seemed to pulse with possibility. "Dear Mr. Johnson," it began, "we are pleased to inform you that you have been selected to receive the Blackstone Foundation Full Academic Scholarship, valued at $280,000 over 4 years." $280,000. Marcus read the number 3 times before it began to feel real. He had never seen that much money written down in one place, let alone associated with his own name. That evening, Marcus practically floated home through the familiar streets of his South Side neighborhood. The same cracked sidewalks and boarded-up storefronts that usually reminded him of everything he wanted to escape now seemed different, temporary. This was his origin story, the struggle that would make his success even sweeter. He found his mother in the kitchen, still in her diner uniform, working on an assignment for her nursing program. Sandra Johnson was a woman who had learned to expect the worst from life, but she had never let that cynicism touch her children. When Marcus handed her the scholarship letter, she read it twice before looking up at him with tears streaming down her face. "Baby, is this real?" she asked, her voice breaking. "It's real, Mama. We did it. We actually did it." Sandra stood up from the wobbly kitchen chair and pulled her son into a hug that felt like it could squeeze away 18 years of worry and struggle. "I am so proud of you," she whispered into his shoulder. "Your father will be proud too, wherever he is." The next few weeks passed in a blur of congratulations, planning, and cautious celebration. Marcus couldn't help but walk a little taller through the halls of Roosevelt High. His teachers treated him with a new kind of respect, not just as a promising student, but as someone who had actually made it out. College representatives who had never returned his calls suddenly wanted meetings. His basketball teammates looked at him with a mixture of pride and envy. Marcus began researching Northwestern's engineering program with the intensity of someone who had been given a gift too precious to waste. He read every course description, watched virtual campus tours until he had memorized the layout, and even started following professors on social media to get a sense of the academic community he would soon join. The scholarship came with conditions, of course, but they seemed reasonable. Maintain a 3.5 GPA, complete 40 hours of community service per semester, and attend monthly mentorship meetings with other Blackstone scholars. Small prices to pay for a future that had seemed impossible just months earlier. His mother started looking at apartments near Northwestern, dreaming out loud about visiting her son on a campus where she wouldn't feel out of place. She talked about finishing her own nursing degree and maybe, someday, working at a hospital near the university. For the first time in years, the Johnson family had something to look forward to that stretched beyond just making it through the month. Marcus even allowed himself to dream bigger. Maybe he would graduate summa cum laude. Maybe he would get into graduate school. Maybe he would become the kind of person who could establish scholarships for kids like himself. The possibilities felt endless, stretching out before him like an open highway. But if there's one thing life had taught Marcus Johnson, it's that the higher you climb, the further you can fall. And sometimes that fall comes from directions you never saw coming. December 15 started like any other Tuesday. Marcus was in his AP Calculus class, working through a particularly challenging integration problem, when a classroom phone rang. Mrs. Patterson's voice over the intercom was tight, professional, different from her usual warmth. "Marcus Johnson to the guidance office. Please." Marcus Johnson. The walk down the hallway felt longer than usual. Something in Mrs. Patterson's tone had triggered an alarm in Marcus's chest, a familiar anxiety that he thought the scholarship had permanently silenced. When he pushed open the office door, he immediately knew something was terribly wrong. Mrs. Patterson was sitting behind her desk, but her usual composure was shattered. Her eyes were red-rimmed, and her hands were folded so tightly in front of her that her knuckles had gone white. On the desk in front of her sat another official envelope, this one bearing the same Blackstone Foundation logo that had once promised everything. "Marcus, please sit down," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. The chair felt different this time, harder somehow. The office that had once been a sanctuary of hope now felt oppressive, the walls closing in with each passing second. "I received a call this morning from the Blackstone Foundation," Mrs. Patterson began, each word seeming to cause her physical pain. There's been what they're calling a clerical error in the scholarship awards." Marcus felt his world tilt off its axis. What kind of clerical error? Mrs. Patterson picked up the letter with hands that trembled noticeably. "According to this notification, your scholarship has been revoked effective immediately. They claim that you were awarded the scholarship due to incorrect information in your application file." The words hit Marcus like a series of physical blows. Revoked. Incorrect information. Each syllable felt designed to destroy everything he had built his future around. Incorrect information? What incorrect information? Marcus's voice was rising, panic beginning to leak through his carefully maintained composure. That's just it, Marcus. They won't specify. The letter just says that upon further review of your application materials, discrepancies were found that make you ineligible for the award. They're demanding the return of any materials they sent and stating that the scholarship will be redistributed to another candidate. Marcus stared at the letter as Mrs. Patterson read the devastating words aloud. The same elegant letterhead that had once represented hope now felt like a weapon designed specifically to crush his dreams. The language was cold, bureaucratic, designed to convey legal finality rather than human understanding. But I didn't lie about anything. Marcus's voice cracked with the strain of holding back tears. You helped me with every single part of that application. You know everything I submitted was true. I know, Marcus. I know. Mrs. Patterson's own voice was thick with emotion. I've been over your application a dozen times since I got the call. Every test score, every grade, every extracurricular activity, every word of your essay. It's all accurate. It's all true. There is no incorrect information. The room felt like it was spinning. Marcus gripped the arms of his chair, trying to anchor himself to something solid as his carefully constructed future crumbled around him. Northwestern University, which had felt so real he could practically smell the library books, suddenly felt like a mirage disappearing in the distance. Can we fight this? There has to be some kind of appeal process. Mrs. Patterson's expression grew even more pained. I've already tried, Marcus. I spent 2 hours on the phone this morning, demanding to speak to supervisors, threatening to involve the school district's legal department. The response was the same every time. The decision is final. No appeals will be considered, and any further contact regarding this matter will be considered harassment. Harassment. The word stung with its implication that Marcus was somehow in the wrong for wanting to understand why his future was being stolen from him. This doesn't make sense, Marcus said, his mind racing through possibilities. Scholarships don't just get revoked for no reason. Someone made a mistake, or someone complained, or someone wanted your scholarship for someone else, Mrs. Patterson said quietly, voicing the suspicion that was growing in both their minds. The implications of her words settled over them like a dark cloud. In the world of competitive scholarships, where thousands of qualified students competed for a handful of awards, the possibility of political interference or favoritism wasn't just possible. It was probable. Who else was in consideration for this scholarship? Is there any way to find out who's getting it now? Mrs. Patterson shook her head. The foundation guards that information like state secrets. But Marcus, I've been doing this for 22 years, and I've never seen anything like this. Scholarships get awarded based on merit. And when there are issues, there are clear processes for resolution. This feels different. Marcus left school that day in a daze, walking through his neighborhood with a devastating letter clutched in his hand. The familiar streets that had looked so temporary just that morning now felt permanent again, closing around him like a prison. The boarded-up storefronts and cracked sidewalks weren't just his past anymore. They were his future. Breaking the news to his mother was the hardest thing Marcus had ever done. Sandra Johnson had been so proud, so hopeful, so ready to believe that their sacrifices had finally paid off. When Marcus handed her the revocation letter, he watched something die in her eyes. "But how can they just take it away?" she asked, reading the letter for the third time. "You earned this, Marcus. You worked harder than any kid should have to work." "I don't know, Mama. They won't tell us why." Sandra's expression shifted from confusion to anger, a fierce protectiveness that Marcus had seen before when landlords tried to raise their rent or when teachers had suggested that Marcus might be better suited for vocational training instead of college prep. "We're going to fight this," she declared. "We'll get a lawyer. We'll call the newspapers. But even as she spoke, they both knew the truth. Lawyers cost money they didn't have. Newspapers weren't interested in stories about poor kids losing scholarships. The system that had briefly opened its doors to Marcus had slammed them shut again, and they had no keys. The next few days passed in a blur of desperate phone calls and dead ends. Mrs. Patterson contacted the foundation repeatedly, each time hitting the same wall of bureaucratic indifference. Marcus tried reaching out to other scholarship organizations, but it was December. Most deadlines had passed months earlier. The college acceptance letter from Northwestern, which had been proudly displayed on their refrigerator, now felt like a cruel joke. Marcus had been accepted, but without the scholarship, attendance was impossible. Even with financial aid, the gap between what they could afford and what the university cost was insurmountable. Sleep became elusive. Marcus would lie awake at night, staring at the ceiling of his small bedroom, replaying every moment of the application process. Had he missed something? Had he accidentally exaggerated an accomplishment or misreported a grade? But no matter how thoroughly he examined his memory, he couldn't find a single false statement. The psychological toll was devastating. Marcus had spent months adjusting his identity from struggling student to scholarship recipient. He had allowed himself to dream, to plan, to hope. Now, stripped of that future, he felt like he was experiencing a kind of grief, mourning the loss of a life that had felt so real he could taste it. His grades began to suffer. His basketball performance declined. His teachers, who had celebrated his scholarship with genuine joy, now looked at him with a mixture of sympathy and confusion. The entire school had heard about his scholarship, and now they were witnessing its mysterious disappearance. But perhaps the worst part was the doubt that began to creep in. Late at night, in his darkest moments, Marcus began to wonder if maybe he hadn't deserved the scholarship after all. Maybe the foundation had realized that kids like him didn't belong at places like Northwestern. Maybe they had seen something in his application that revealed his unworthiness. These thoughts were poison, but they were persistent. They whispered to him during moments of weakness, suggesting that perhaps the revocation was actually justice, a correction of mistake that had temporarily elevated him above his proper station. 3 weeks after receiving the revocation letter, Marcus was sitting in the school library, mechanically working through homework assignments that felt pointless now that his future had been erased. The Christmas decorations hanging from the ceiling seemed to mock him with their cheerful colors and promises of joy. That's when he noticed someone watching him from across the library. A man in an expensive suit, maybe in his 40s, with graying temples and eyes that seemed to be evaluating everything they saw. When Marcus looked up, the man quickly averted his gaze and pretended to be interested in a book about local history. Something about the encounter felt wrong, staged somehow. Marcus had never seen this man before, and strangers in expensive suits didn't typically spend their afternoons in Roosevelt High's underfunded library. When Marcus looked again 5 minutes later, the man was gone, but the book he had been pretending to read was still open on the table. That night, Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that he was being watched, evaluated, judged by forces he couldn't see or understand. The scholarship revocation had been devastating enough, but now there were hints of something larger at play, something that went beyond simple bureaucratic mistakes or clerical errors. Little did Marcus know that his story was about to take a turn that would challenge everything he thought he understood about power, privilege, and the mysterious ways that help sometimes arrives when we need it most. But before we continue with this incredible journey, I need to ask you something. If this story is resonating with you, if you're feeling the same anger and frustration that Marcus was experiencing, then you're exactly the kind of person who needs to be part of our community. Hit that like button right now and subscribe to our channel, because stories like this, stories about ordinary people facing extraordinary circumstances, are what we're all about. And here's something special. We have an email newsletter where we share even deeper, more detailed versions of stories like this one. Stories that are too complex, too nuanced for the YouTube format. If you want to get those exclusive stories sent directly to your inbox, check the description below for the link to our email subscription. Trust me, what we share there will blow your mind. Because what happened to Marcus next? What he discovered about the forces working against him and the mysterious benefactor who was about to enter his life? That's going to challenge everything you think you know about how the world really works. The weeks following the scholarship revocation felt like living in a fog of confusion and despair. Marcus had become a ghost of his former self, going through the motions of senior year while internally screaming at the injustice of it all. But sometimes when you're drowning in darkness, you become more sensitive to the subtle signs that something bigger is happening around you. It started with small things. Marcus began noticing cars parked outside his apartment building that didn't belong to any of the residents. A black sedan with tinted windows that would appear for a few hours, then disappear. The same car, or one very similar, parked across from Roosevelt High during his basketball practice. When he mentioned it to his teammates, they laughed it off as paranoia, but Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that someone was keeping tabs on him. Then there were the phone calls. His mother started receiving strange calls at the diner where she worked. The call would ask for her by name, then hang up when she came to phone. It happened 3 times in 1 week before stopping completely. When Sandra tried to report to the police, they told her it was probably a wrong number or a telemarketing glitch. But the most unsettling incident happened on a Friday evening in January. Marcus was walking home from his job at a grocery store, taking his usual route to the neighborhood, when a man approached him near the bus stop. He was well-dressed, probably in his 50s, with a kind of confident bearing that suggested money and influence. Marcus Johnson? The man asked, his voice smooth and professional. Yeah, who's asking? The man smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. I represent certain interests that have been following your situation with great concern. The scholarship issue, specifically. Marcus felt his pulse quicken. What do you know about my scholarship? More than you might think, the man replied, pulling out a business card that looked expensive but contained only a phone number. Let's just say that sometimes talented young people like yourself get caught up in larger games that they don't understand. Games where the rules aren't always fair. What kind of games? The man glanced around nervously, as if checking to make sure they weren't being overheard. The kind where scholarship decisions aren't always based on merit alone, where certain families, certain names, carry more weight than grades or potential. Marcus stared at the business card, his mind racing. Are you saying someone else got my scholarship? Someone who didn't earn it? I'm saying that the Blackstone Foundation has connections to some very influential people. People who have children applying to the same schools you were hoping to attend. The man's voice dropped to barely above a whisper. Your scholarship didn't disappear because of incorrect information, Marcus. It disappeared because someone with more power wanted it for someone else. Before Marcus could ask another question, the man was walking away, leaving him standing at the bus stop with nothing but a business card and a revelation that made his blood boil. The scholarship hadn't been revoked because he was unworthy. It had been stolen because someone else was more connected. That night, Marcus lay in bed staring at the business card, turning it over and over in his hands. Part of him wanted to call the number immediately, to demand more information, to finally get some answers. But another part of him was terrified of what he might learn. If powerful people were really working against him, what chance did he have? The next morning brought an unexpected visitor. Mrs. Patterson called Marcus into her office with an urgency in her voice that he hadn't heard since the day she'd given him the original scholarship news. Marcus, something very strange happened yesterday, she said, closing the door behind him with unusual care. I received a call from someone claiming to be conducting an investigation into scholarship fraud at the Blackstone Foundation. Marcus felt his heart skip. What kind of investigation? The caller wouldn't give me specific details, but they knew things about your case that haven't been made public. They knew about the revocation. They knew about your application materials. They even knew about the phone calls I made trying to appeal the decision. Mrs. Patterson's expression was a mixture of hope and concern. Marcus, they asked me to compile a complete file of everything related to your scholarship, every email, every document, every phone call record. Did they say who they were working for? No, and that's what worries me. But Marcus, she leaned forward, her voice dropping to a whisper. What if someone is actually trying to help you? What if there are people out there who know this whole thing was wrong and are working to fix it? The possibility felt too good to be true, but Marcus couldn't ignore the timing. The mysterious man at the bus stop, the investigation call to Mrs. Patterson, the feeling of being watched. It all suggested that his case was as closed as the Blackstone Foundation wanted him to believe. Over the next few days, Marcus became hyper-aware of everything happening around him. He noticed that the black sedan had returned, but now it felt less threatening and more protective, as if someone was keeping watch over him rather than stalking him. His mother mentioned that the strange phone calls had stopped, but now she was occasionally receiving calls where no one spoke, but she could hear typing in the background, as if someone was taking notes. The breakthrough came on a Tuesday evening in late January. Marcus was in his bedroom, working on college applications for schools that offered smaller scholarships he might still qualify for, when his phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Marcus, if you want answers about what really happened to your scholarship, be at the downtown library tomorrow at 4 p.m., third floor reference section. Come alone. A friend. Marcus stared at the message until the words seemed to blur together. Every instinct told him this was dangerous, that he was being drawn into something bigger and more complicated than he could handle. But the alternative was accepting that his dreams had been crushed by forces he would never understand, and that felt like a different kind of death. The next day dragged by with agonizing slowness. Marcus went through his classes on autopilot, his mind consumed with questions about who had sent the message and what they might reveal. By 3:30, he was on a bus heading downtown, his palms sweating despite the January cold. The downtown library was a massive, imposing building that Marcus had only visited a few times for research projects. The third floor reference section was quiet, populated mostly by graduate students and researchers hunched over thick academic texts. Marcus found an empty table and waited, pretending to read a book while scanning the room for anyone who might be his mysterious contact. At exactly 4 p.m., a woman approached his table. She was probably in her 30s, professionally dressed but not ostentatiously wealthy like the man at the bus stop had been. She had the tired eyes of someone who had seen too much and the determined posture of someone who refused to give up. "Marcus Johnson?" she asked quietly. "Yes. My name is Sarah Chun. I'm an investigative journalist, and I've been looking into irregularities in scholarship distributions for the past 6 months." She sat down across from him, pulling out a tablet and a small digital recorder. "Your case caught my attention because it fits a pattern I've been tracking." Marcus felt his heart racing. "What kind of pattern?" Sarah looked around to make sure no one was listening, then leaned forward. "Merit-based scholarships being revoked from deserving students and redistributed to less qualified applicants who happen to have the right connections. In the past year alone, I've documented 12 cases where this has happened, and I believe yours makes 13. But how is that even possible? Aren't there oversight committees, verification processes?" "There are, but they're often made up of the same people who benefit from corruption." Sarah pulled up a document on her tablet. The Blackstone Foundation, for example, has a board of directors that includes several prominent business leaders, politicians, and university administrators. These are people with children and grandchildren of their own, people who understand the value of a good education and aren't above bending the rules to secure it. She showed Marcus a list of names that meant nothing to him, but the titles were impressive. CEOs of major corporations, state senators, university board members. These were people with the kind of power that could make scholarship decisions disappear and reappear with a phone call. "So who got my scholarship?" Marcus asked, though he wasn't sure he wanted to know the answer. Sarah's expression grew grim. "A young man named Bradley Whitmore. His grandfather is Senator James Whitmore, who sits on the Appropriations Committee that oversees federal education funding. Bradley's academic record is decent but not exceptional. His SAT scores are 200 points lower than yours, and his extracurricular activities are limited to membership in exclusive clubs that charge thousands of dollars in fees." The injustice of it hit Marcus like a physical blow. While he had been working 20 hours a week and studying by phone light, Bradley Whitmore had been coasting through high school with every advantage money could buy. And when even those advantages weren't enough to secure a merit-based scholarship, his family had simply used their influence to steal one from a more deserving candidate. "But if you know all this, why can't you expose it? Why can't you get my scholarship back?" "Because proving it is nearly impossible," Sarah replied. "These people are very good at covering their tracks. The paperwork always looks legitimate. The reasons for revocation are always vague, but legally defensible, and anyone who tries to dig too deep finds themselves facing lawsuits from very expensive attorneys." Marcus felt his brief spark of hope beginning to fade. "So that's it? They win and I lose, and there's nothing anyone can do about it." Sarah smiled for the first time since sitting down. "I didn't say there was nothing we could do. I said proving it was nearly impossible. But sometimes, Marcus, the most effective justice doesn't come from courts or official investigations. Sometimes it comes from people who understand that the system is broken and are willing to work outside it to make things right." "What do you mean?" "I mean that there are people who've been watching your case, people with resources and influence of their own, people who believe that merit should matter more than connections." Sarah leaned back in her chair, studying Marcus's face. "Have you noticed anything unusual lately? Anyone showing unexpected interest in your situation?" Marcus thought about the man at the bus stop, the mysterious cars, the feeling of being watched. Maybe there have been some strange things happening. That's because someone has been investigating the situation independently, someone with the power to do something about it. I can't tell you who they are, for your safety and theirs, but I can tell you that they've been very impressed with how you've handled this injustice. Impressed how? You could have given up, Marcus. You could have accepted the revocation and slipped back into the life that was expected of you. Instead, you kept fighting, kept asking questions, kept believing that you deserve better. That kind of character, that kind of resilience, it doesn't go unnoticed by people who understand its value. Sarah packed up her tablet and recorder, preparing to leave. "Here's what I need you to do. Go home. Keep doing what you've been doing and wait. I know that's frustrating, but trust me when I say that wheels are in motion that you can't see yet. Sometimes the best help comes from directions you never expected." She stood up, then paused as if remembering something important. "Oh, and Marcus, when the help comes, and it will come, don't ask too many questions about where it came from. Some angels prefer to remain anonymous, and some kinds of justice work best in the shadows." With that cryptic message, Sarah Chun walked away, leaving Marcus alone in the library with more questions and answers. But for the first time in weeks, a genuine sense that his story wasn't over yet. The days following Marcus's meeting with Sarah Chin felt charged with possibility and tension. Every phone call, every knock at the door, every unexpected interaction carried the potential to be the moment when everything changed. Marcus found himself studying the faces of strangers, wondering if one of them might be the mysterious benefactor Sarah had hinted at. But it wasn't a stranger who would deliver the next piece of the puzzle. It was Mrs. Patterson, and the news she brought was unlike anything Marcus could have imagined. On a gray Thursday morning in early February, Marcus was called to the guidance office once again. This time, Mrs. Patterson wasn't alone. Sitting across from her desk was a man Marcus had never seen before, but whose presence seemed to fill the small office with an air of quiet authority. He was probably in his mid-50s, with silver hair and expensive clothes that looked effortless rather than showy. Everything about him suggested wealth, but wealth that didn't need to advertise itself. His handshake was firm, his smile was genuine, and his eyes held a kind of intelligence that missed nothing. "Marcus, I'd like you to meet Dr. Harrison Blake," Mrs. Patterson said, her voice carrying an excitement she was trying to contain. "He's here to discuss some opportunities that might interest you." Dr. Blake gestured for Marcus to sit, then leaned forward with the focused attention of someone who had traveled a long way specifically for this conversation. "Marcus, I've been following your situation with great interest," he began, his voice carrying the measured cadence of someone accustomed to being listened to. "What happened to your Blackstone scholarship was not just unfortunate. It was wrong, and it represents a kind of systemic corruption that undermines the very principles of merit-based education." Marcus felt his pulse quicken. This was the first time an adult in a position of authority had acknowledged what he had suspected all along. "You know about Bradley Whitmore?" Marcus asked. Dr. Blake's expression darkened slightly. "I know about Bradley Whitmore, and I know about his grandfather's phone calls to the Blackstone Foundation Board. I know about the private meeting where your scholarship was discussed as if it were a commodity to be traded rather than an award you had earned through years of hard work and exceptional achievement." The confirmation hit Marcus like a validation he had been craving for months. He hadn't been paranoid or entitled. He had been the victim of a rigged system. But knowing about it and proving it are two different things, Marcus said, remembering Sarah's warnings about the difficulty of exposing such corruption. "Exactly right," Dr. Blake agreed, "which is why traditional approaches to justice wouldn't work in this case. Senator Whitmore has too many connections, too much influence, and too many favors he can call in. Fighting him through official channels would be like bringing a knife to a gunfight." Mrs. Patterson shifted uncomfortably in her chair. "Dr. Blake, what exactly are you proposing?" Dr. Blake reached into his briefcase and pulled out a thick folder. "I'm proposing that we ensure Marcus receive the education he deserves, regardless of what the Blackstone Foundation decides to do with their corrupted process." He opened the folder to reveal documents that made Marcus's eyes widen. Bank statements, investment portfolios, property deeds, the paperwork of serious wealth. "My name is Harrison Blake, and I am the founder and CEO of Blake Technologies, a software company that went public 15 years ago and made me considerably more wealthy than I ever expected to be." He spoke matter-of-factly, as if discussing the weather. "I'm also someone who grew up in circumstances very similar to yours, Marcus. Single mother, financial struggles, dreams that seemed impossible until someone gave me a chance." Marcus stared at the documents, trying to process what he was seeing. Blake Technologies was a company he'd heard of. Their software was used in hospitals and schools across the country. This wasn't just wealth. This was a kind of success story that seemed to happen to other people. 40 years ago, I was in almost exactly your position," Dr. Blake continued. "Brilliant grades, no money, and a scholarship that disappeared due to political pressure. The difference was that there was no mysterious benefactor waiting in the wings to help me. I had to claw my way through community college, work 3 jobs to pay for state school, and fight for every opportunity." He leaned back in his chair, his eyes taking on a distant quality as he remembered those struggles. "It took me 15 years longer to achieve my goals than it should have, and I promised myself that if I ever had the resources to help someone else avoid that same unnecessary hardship, I would do it." Mrs. Patterson was staring at Dr. Blake with something approaching awe. "Are you saying what I think you're saying?" "I'm saying that Marcus Johnson is going to Northwestern University as planned, with all expenses paid, and with additional support that will ensure he never has to choose between his education and his family's financial security." Dr. Blake's voice carried the finality of someone making a promise rather than an offer. Marcus felt the room spinning around him. "I don't understand. You don't even know me. Why would you do this for a complete stranger?" Dr. Blake smiled, and for the first time, Marcus saw something deeply personal in his expression. Because 35 years ago, a complete stranger did something similar for me, and he made me promise to pay it forward when I had the chance. Because talent and determination shouldn't be wasted due to corruption and political favoritism. And because sometimes, Marcus, the universe provides opportunities to be part of something bigger than ourselves. He pulled out another set of documents. The Blake Foundation Scholarship. Full tuition, room and board, monthly stipend, and summer internship opportunities at my company. No political connections required. No board of directors who can be influenced by senators making phone calls. Just merit, pure and simple. Marcus stared at the scholarship documents, afraid to touch them in case they disappeared like a mirage. Is this real? Are you serious? I'm completely serious. The paperwork has already been filed with Northwestern. The money has been transferred to their accounts. And your admission is secure. Dr. Blake's voice was warm but firm. The only condition is that someday, when you're successful and established, you help someone else the way I'm helping you today. Mrs. Patterson was openly crying now, not bothering to hide her tears of joy and relief. Marcus, do you understand what this means? You're going to college. You're going to have the future you've worked so hard for. But Marcus was struggling to process the magnitude of what was happening. Dr. Blake, this is incredibly generous, but I have to ask, how did you even know about my situation? How did you find out about the scholarship revocation? Dr. Blake exchanged a quick glance with Mrs. Patterson before answering. Let's just say that I have people who keep me informed about cases of educational injustice, particularly cases involving exceptional students who are being systematically denied opportunities they've earned. Marcus thought about Sarah Chan, about the mysterious man at the bus stop, about the cars that have been watching him. Have you been having me investigated? Not investigated, Marcus. Protected. Dr. Blake's voice took on a more serious tone. When you start asking questions about corruption at the level we're discussing, you attract attention from people who prefer that their methods remain hidden. I want to make sure that you and your family remain safe while we worked on a solution. The implications of that statement sent a chill down Marcus's spine. Safe from who? From people who have a lot to lose if stories like yours become public. Senator Whitmore didn't just make one phone call to get his grandson your scholarship. He made several. And he left a paper trail that could be very damaging if it ever came to light. Dr. Blake leaned forward, his expression grave. The people who enabled this corruption have been watching you too, Marcus, but not with the intention of helping. Marcus felt a surge of anger at the thought that his family might have been in danger because he had dared to question an injustice. What kind of people are we talking about? The kind who believe that questioning their privilege is a form of insubordination that needs to be discouraged. The kind who see students like you as threats to the natural order they worked so hard to maintain. Dr. Blake's voice carried decades of experience dealing with such people. But they underestimated two things: your character and the fact that there are people like me who believe in fighting fire with fire. The pieces were starting to come together in Marcus's mind. The mysterious watchers, the investigation Sarah had mentioned, the sense that powerful forces were moving in the background of his life. It had all been leading to this moment. So you're not just giving me a scholarship, Marcus said slowly. You're making a statement. Dr. Blake smiled with genuine warmth. I'm making several statements. That merit matters more than connections. That corruption shouldn't go unanswered. And that sometimes the best way to change a broken system is to build a better one alongside it. He stood up, extending his hand to Marcus. So, what do you say, young man? Are you ready to accept the future you've earned and help ensure that other deserving students get the same opportunity? Marcus stood and shook Dr. Blake's hand, feeling like he was crossing a threshold into a completely different life. Yes, sir. Absolutely yes. But even as he spoke the words, Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that accepting this incredible gift would also mean accepting responsibility for something much larger than his own education. Dr. Blake wasn't just offering him a scholarship. He was offering him a chance to be part of a quiet revolution against a system that had been rigged against people like him for generations. And as they would all soon discover, revolutions always come with unexpected consequences. I know some of you are sitting there thinking this sounds too good to be true, like something out of a movie rather than real life. But here's the thing about real life. Sometimes it's stranger and more dramatic than any fiction we can imagine. And sometimes, when injustice seems overwhelming, help arrives from the most unexpected sources. If this story is keeping you on the edge of your seat, if you're feeling that mix of anger at the system and hope for Marcus's future, then you need to hit that subscribe button right now. Because this story is about to take turns that will challenge everything you think you know about power, justice, and the ways that ordinary people can fight back against corruption. And remember that email newsletter I mentioned? This is exactly the kind of story we dive deeper into there. The behind-the-scenes details, the follow-up investigations, the real-world implications of what happens when people like Dr. Blake decide to take matters into their own hands. Check the description for that link, because trust me, you don't want to miss what we're uncovering about this case. Because what Marcus didn't know yet was that accepting Dr. Blake's offer would put him at the center of a much larger conflict, one that would test not just his character, but his courage in ways he never could have imagined. Marcus walked out of Mrs. Patterson's office feeling like he was floating 6 inches above the ground. The Blake Foundation scholarship paperwork felt substantial and real in his hands. Official letterhead, embossed seals, bank routing numbers that represented more money than his family had ever seen. But underneath the euphoria, a small voice in the back of his mind whispered that nothing this good ever came without a price. That evening, as Marcus sat at his family's small kitchen table, explaining the miraculous turn of events to his mother, he couldn't shake the memory of Dr. Blake's words about protection and people who preferred their methods to remain hidden. Sandra Johnson listened with growing amazement and concern as her son described a mysterious benefactor who had appeared just when hope seemed lost. "Baby, this is wonderful news, but I have to ask, what does this man want from you?" Sandra's years of struggling had taught her to be suspicious of gifts that seemed too generous. Rich people don't just hand out scholarships to strangers without expecting something in return. Marcus had been wondering the same thing. He says all he wants is for me to help someone else someday, the way he's helping me now. Sandra studied the scholarship documents, her nurse's training making her naturally analytical. "Marcus, look at these numbers. This isn't just tuition and room and board. There's money here for books, living expenses, even emergency funds. This is more than a scholarship. This is like having a wealthy family member taking care of everything." She was right. The Blake Foundation scholarship was comprehensive in a way that went beyond mere generosity into the realm of life-changing intervention. Marcus began to understand that Dr. Blake wasn't just paying for his education. He was removing every possible financial barrier that might derail Marcus's success. The next few days brought a whirlwind of activity. Northwestern University confirmed receipt of the Blake Foundation scholarship and assured Marcus that his admission was secure. Mrs. Patterson worked with the registrar's office to finalize his course selections. For the first time in months, Marcus allowed himself to start planning for a future that felt real and achievable. But it was on Friday afternoon that Marcus truly began to understand the complex game he had become part of. He was leaving basketball practice when he noticed a familiar black sedan parked across from the school. This time, instead of driving away when he looked, the driver rolled down the window and gestured for him to approach. Marcus recognized the man immediately. It was the same person who had approached him at the bus stop weeks earlier. "Get in," the man said. "Dr. Blake wants to speak with you." Marcus hesitated. Despite everything Dr. Blake had done for him, there was something about the cloak and dagger nature of the situation that made him nervous. "Can't he just call me? Or meet at school again?" The man's expression grew serious. "There have been developments in your case that require more private discussion. Nothing dangerous, but definitely sensitive." Against his better judgment, Marcus got into the sedan. The interior was luxurious but not flashy, and the driver handled the Chicago traffic with professional competence of someone who did this for a living. They drove for 20 minutes through parts of the city Marcus had never seen, eventually pulling into the underground garage of a sleek downtown office building. Dr. Blake was waiting in a conference room on the 32nd floor, but he wasn't alone. Sarah Chun, the investigative journalist, was there, along with 2 other people Marcus didn't recognize, a woman in an expensive suit who looked like a lawyer, and a younger man with the intense focus of someone who worked with computers all day. "Marcus, thank you for coming," Dr. Blake said, his tone more formal than it had been in the school office. "I apologize for the dramatic summons, but we've uncovered some information that I think you need to hear." Saracen opened a laptop and turned it toward Marcus. On the screen was a series of email exchanges, official-looking documents, and what appeared to be phone transcripts. "After our conversation at the library, I kept digging into the Blackstone Foundation situation," she explained. "What I found goes deeper than simple favoritism. It's a systematic corruption scheme that's been operating for years." She clicked through the documents, pointing out key details. Senator Whitmore didn't just make a few phone calls about his grandson's scholarship. He's been trading political favors for educational opportunities, using his position on the education committee to pressure multiple scholarship foundations. Marcus stared at the evidence, feeling sick. How many other students have had their scholarships stolen? At least 47 that we can document, said the woman in the suit, who introduced herself as attorney Rebecca Martinez. And those are just the cases where we have clear paper trails. The actual number is probably much higher. Dr. Blake leaned forward, his expression grave. Marcus, the reason I asked you here is that we're preparing to expose this entire operation. We have enough evidence to bring down not just Senator Whitmore, but several other politicians and foundation board members who've been participating in this scheme. That's good, right? Marcus asked, though something in the room's atmosphere suggested it wasn't that simple. The computer specialist, who had been introduced as David Park, pulled up another screen. The problem is that going public with this information will make you the face of the scandal. Every news outlet in the country is going to want to interview the student whose stolen scholarship exposed a nationwide corruption ring. Marcus felt his stomach drop. I never asked to be the face of anything. I just wanted to go to college. I know, Dr. Blake said gently, and that's exactly why you have a choice to make. We can proceed with the investigation and exposure, which will likely result in justice, but will also make your life very public and potentially very difficult. Or we can keep this information private. You can attend Northwestern on the Blake Foundation scholarship, and the corruption continues unchallenged. Saracen added, there's also a third option, but it's more complicated. We could pursue the investigation while protecting your identity, but that would require some very careful legal maneuvering and wouldn't be as effective at creating systemic change. Marcus looked around the room at these adults who had somehow made his personal struggle into a much larger battle. What do you think I should do? I think you should make a decision that feels right to you, Dr. Blake replied. But I also think you should know what the stakes are. If we expose this corruption, we'll not only get justice for you, but we'll potentially save dozens of other deserving students from having their dreams stolen. If we don't, Senator Whitmore and his allies will continue operating with impunity. Attorney Martinez opened another folder. There's one more thing you need to know, Marcus. Senator Whitmore's people have been making inquiries about you. They know that someone is digging into their activities, and they're trying to find out who. They've hired a private investigation firm to look into your background, your family, your associates. The implications hit Marcus like a cold wave. They're investigating my family? Nothing illegal or harmful, Dr. Blake assured him quickly. But they're looking for leverage, anything they can use to discredit you if the story goes public. They want to be prepared to paint you as ungrateful, dishonest, or undeserving if you become a threat to their operation. Marcus thought about his mother, working double shifts and going to nursing school, about his younger sister, who looked up to him, about the fragile stability they had built despite years of struggle. The idea of powerful people digging through their lives, looking for weaknesses to exploit, made him angry and frightened at the same time. How long do I have to decide? The story is essentially ready to publish, Sarah said. I can hold it for a week, maybe 2, but beyond that, other journalists are going to start uncovering the same information. If we don't control how this story breaks, someone else will, and we won't be able to protect you nearly as well. Dr. Blake stood up and walked to the floor-to-ceiling windows that offered a spectacular view of Chicago's skyline. Marcus, I want you to understand something. Whatever you decide, your scholarship is secure. Your future is secure. You don't owe me anything beyond taking advantage of the opportunities you'll have at Northwestern. But if you're willing to stand up and fight, we can do more than just secure your future. We can change the system that tried to destroy it. Marcus looked around the room at these people who had somehow become invested in his story. Sarah Chun, risking her career to expose corruption. Dr. Blake, using his wealth to fight injustice. Attorney Martinez and David Park, dedicating their skills to a cause that wouldn't make them any money. Why is this so important to all of you? He asked. Dr. Blake turned back from the window. Because, Marcus, corruption thrives in darkness. It depends on victims being too afraid, too isolated, or too powerless to fight back. When someone like you, someone with character and intelligence and genuine merit, stands up and says this is wrong, it shines a light that the corrupt can't tolerate. Sarah Chin closed her laptop. And because stories like yours are happening everywhere, every day. Rich, connected families stealing opportunities from deserving kids who worked harder and achieved more. If we don't draw a line somewhere, if we don't say enough, then merit becomes meaningless and the American dream becomes available only to those who can afford to buy it. Marcus felt the weight of their expectations, but also something else, a growing sense that this decision would define not just his own future, but the kind of person he would become. He could take Dr. Blake's scholarship, attend Northwestern, and build a successful life while staying safely out of the spotlight. Or he could accept that sometimes fighting for justice means accepting the risks that come with it. If I agree to go public, what kind of protection are we talking about? Attorney Martinez opened her briefcase. Full legal representation, media training, security consulting, and a comprehensive communication strategy. We'll control how the story is told, when it's released, and how much of your personal information becomes public. It won't be easy, but it won't destroy your life either. Dr. Blake returned to his seat. Marcus, I need you to know that I've been where you are right now. 40 years ago, I had to choose between keeping my head down and accepting an injustice, or fighting back knowing it might make my life more difficult. I chose to keep my head down, and I've regretted it ever since. What happened? I let the people who stole my scholarship get away with it. They went on to steal from other students, and the corruption continued unchecked. I succeeded despite them, but I always wondered how many other deserving kids didn't get that chance because I chose safety over justice. Marcus stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the city where he'd grown up, where he had struggled, where he had learned to fight for everything he wanted. Somewhere out there, other students were working just as hard as he had, dreaming of opportunities that might be stolen from them by people who believed that power and connections mattered more than merit. When he turned back to face the room, Marcus felt something settling into place inside him, a clarity that came from finally understanding what kind of person he wanted to be. Let's do it, he said. Let's expose them all. The room erupted in smiles and handshakes, but Marcus barely noticed. He was thinking about his mother, about how proud she would be when she learned that her son had chosen to fight for what was right, even when it would have been easier and safer to stay silent. But Marcus Johnson had no idea that his decision to seek justice would set in motion a chain of events that would test his courage, his character, and his commitment to doing right in ways he never could have imagined. And the most dangerous part was still to come. The transformation of Marcus Johnson from anonymous high school student to the face of a national scandal happened with breathtaking speed. Within 48 hours of his decision to go public, Sarah Chen's expose was published simultaneously in the Washington Post, the Chicago Tribune, and distributed to news outlets across the country. The headline was devastating in its simplicity. Senators, CEOs, and stolen dreams. How America's elite rigged the scholarship system. Marcus's story anchored the piece, but the investigation revealed something far more extensive than anyone had imagined. The corruption scheme involved 12 senators, 43 corporate executives, and 22 scholarship foundations. Over 5 years, an estimated 200 deserving students had been denied scholarships that were redirected to less qualified applicants with better connections. The story broke on a Tuesday morning, and by Tuesday afternoon, Marcus's phone was ringing nonstop with interview requests from major news networks. Dr. Blake's media team had prepared him for this, but nothing could prepare him for the surreal experience of watching his own face on CNN while sitting in his high school guidance counselor's office. Marcus Johnson was valedictorian of his class, captain of the basketball team, and worked 20 hours a week to help support his family, the CNN anchor was saying. His scholarship to Northwestern University was revoked with no explanation, only to be awarded to Bradley Whitmore, whose grandfather sits on the Senate Education Committee. Mrs. Patterson watched the broadcast with a mixture of pride and concern. Are you ready for this, Marcus? Because once this story really takes off, your life is never going to be the same. She was right. By Wednesday morning, there were news vans parked outside Roosevelt High School and reporters trying to interview Marcus's classmates. His mother had to take time off work to deal with journalists calling the diner where she worked. His younger sister called him in tears because reporters were approaching her at her middle school. But it was a reaction from the other side that truly revealed the stakes of what Marcus had chosen to do. Senator Whitmore's office issued a statement that was a masterclass in political deflection. Senator Whitmore has always supported merit-based education funding and is disappointed that his grandson appears to have been caught up in irregularities at the Blackstone Foundation. The senator had no knowledge of any inappropriate communications and looks forward to cooperating fully with any official investigation. The statement was carefully crafted to sound cooperative while admitting nothing, but Marcus could read between the lines. The senator was preparing to throw his own grandson under the bus if necessary to protect his political career. More concerning was a coordinated response from what Dr. Blake called the network, the interlocking web of wealthy families, corporate executives, and political figures who had been benefiting from the corruption scheme. Within days of the story breaking, Marcus found himself the target of a sophisticated character assassination campaign. Anonymous sources began feeding stories to gossip websites, suggesting that Marcus had inflated his accomplishments on his scholarship applications. His high school grades were leaked to bloggers who questioned whether his GPA was artificially enhanced by grade inflation. Social media accounts with no real names began spreading rumors about his family's financial situation, suggesting they weren't as needy as they claimed. Dr. Blake had warned Marcus that this would happen, but experiencing it was different from being intellectually prepared for it. Watching strangers on the internet dissect his life, question his integrity, and attack his family felt like a constant assault on everything he had worked to build. The psychological toll was immediate and severe. Marcus began having trouble sleeping, jolting awake at 3 a.m. with his mind racing through all the ways the attacks might escalate. His appetite disappeared. His performance in both basketball and academics began to suffer as his concentration fractured under the constant stress. It was during this lowest point that Marcus received a phone call that would change everything. He was sitting in his bedroom on a Friday evening, trying to focus on homework, while ignoring the news van still parked on his street, when his phone rang with a number he didn't recognize. "Marcus? My name is Jennifer Walsh. I'm a senior at Columbia University." Marcus almost hung up, assuming it was another reporter, but something in the young woman's voice made him pause. "I saw your story on the news," she continued, "and I had to call you." "Marcus, the same thing happened to me 3 years ago." Marcus sat up straighter. "What do you mean?" "I had a full scholarship to Yale. Academic merit, just like yours. 3 weeks before graduation, I got a letter saying it had been revoked due to irregularities in my application. No specifics, no appeal process, nothing." Marcus felt his heart racing. "Who got your scholarship?" "A girl named Amanda Richardson. Her father is the CEO of Richardson Industries, and her mother sits on Yale's Board of Trustees. Amanda's grades were good but not exceptional, and her test scores were significantly lower than mine." "What did you do?" Jennifer's laugh was bitter. "What could I do? I was 18 years old from a working-class family in Ohio. I had no connections, no money for lawyers, no idea that what happened to me was part of a larger pattern. I ended up at a state school with partial financial aid and student loans that I'm still paying off." Marcus felt sick thinking about how many students had experienced the same injustice he had, but without the mysterious benefactor who had appeared to help him. "Jennifer, why are you calling me?" "Because you did something I was too afraid to do. You fought back. And because of your courage, other people are starting to come forward." Over the next hour, Jennifer told Marcus about a group of students and families who had been quietly organizing since his story broke. They called themselves the Merit Defense Coalition, and they were documenting cases of scholarship fraud going back more than a decade. "We found 47 cases so far, and we're getting new reports every day," Jennifer explained. Students from all over the country who had scholarships mysteriously revoked or denied, usually in favor of less qualified applicants with better connections. "Are you going public with this?" "We want to, but we need someone to be our spokesperson. Someone who's already in the spotlight and can't be easily dismissed or intimidated." Jennifer paused. "Marcus, we need you." The request hit Marcus like a physical weight. He was already struggling under the pressure of being the face of one scandal. The idea of taking on responsibility for dozens of other cases felt overwhelming. "I don't know if I can handle any more attention," he admitted. "The attacks have been pretty intense." "I know, and I'm sorry you're going through that. But Marcus, you have something the rest of us don't have. People protecting you. Dr. Blake, the legal team, the media strategy. Most of us face this alone and had to choose between our futures and fighting a system that was designed to crush us." Marcus thought about Dr. Blake's resources, about Sarah Chen's journalistic platform, about the team of lawyers and security experts who were working to keep him safe. Jennifer was right. He had advantages that other victims of this corruption didn't have. "What would you need me to do?" "Hold a press conference. Stand with us while we tell our stories. Show the world that this wasn't just about one scholarship or one senator. It's about a systematic theft of opportunities from the students who earned the most." That night, Marcus called Dr. Blake and explained Jennifer's request. The response was immediate and supportive. "Marcus, this is exactly what we hope would happen," Dr. Blake said. "One person speaking out can be dismissed as an isolated incident. 50 people speaking out represents a pattern that can't be ignored. But it also means more scrutiny, more attacks, more pressure." "Yes, it does. And I won't lie to you. It's going to get harder before it gets easier. But Marcus, you have a chance to be part of something historic. This could be the moment when merit starts mattering more than connections in American education." Sarah Chun was equally enthusiastic, when Marcus called her. "This is a journalist's dream," she said. "A follow-up story with dozens of victims coming forward, all tied together by your courage to speak out first. This could bring down the entire network." But it was his mother's reaction that ultimately convinced Marcus to take on this larger responsibility. Sandra Johnson listened quietly as her son explained the situation, the opportunity, and the risks. When he finished, she was silent for a long moment, looking out the kitchen window at the neighborhood that had shaped her son's character. "Baby, do you remember what I used to tell you when you were little and other kids were picking on you? Stand up for what's right, even when it's hard." "Especially when it's hard," Sandra corrected. "Marcus, there are kids out there right now working just as hard as you did, dreaming just as big as you dreamed, and they're going to have those dreams stolen by the same people who tried to steal yours. If you don't stand up for them, who will?" That Monday morning, Marcus Johnson stood before a crowd of reporters and cameras in downtown Chicago, flanked by 47 other students and families who had been victims of scholarship fraud. Jennifer Walsh was there, along with students from California, Texas, New York, and states across the country. "My name is Marcus Johnson," he began, his voice steady despite the magnitude of the moment. "And I'm here to tell you that what happened to me was not an isolated incident. It was part of a systematic corruption of the merit-based scholarship system that has stolen opportunities from hundreds, maybe thousands, of deserving students." As he spoke, introducing his fellow victims and detailing the scope of the corruption they had uncovered, Marcus felt something he hadn't experienced since this whole ordeal began. Genuine hope that they might actually win. But as every general in every war throughout history has learned, hope can be a dangerous thing, because the more you have to lose, the more desperately your enemies will fight to take it away from you. And Marcus Johnson was about to discover just how far powerful people would go to protect their corrupt system when it was truly threatened for the first time. Friends, I need to pause here for a moment because what happens next in Marcus's story is going to shock you. We're talking about powerful people who felt cornered, who saw their entire system of privilege being exposed, and who decided that playing by the rules was no longer an option. If you're invested in seeing justice done, if you believe that courage should be rewarded and corruption should be punished, then you absolutely need to hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell. Because the next part of the story involves dangers that Marcus never could have imagined when he first decided to fight back. And don't forget about our email newsletter, where we dive deep into the real-world consequences of stories like this one, the behind-the-scenes political maneuvering, the legal strategies, the personal cost of taking on the most powerful people in the country. Check the description for that link, because what we reveal there will give you a whole new understanding of how these battles really work. Because Marcus Johnson's fight for justice was about to become something much more dangerous, a war for the soul of American education, with casualties that no one saw coming. The morning after the Merit Defense Coalition press conference, Marcus woke up to a world that had fundamentally changed overnight. The story had exploded across every major news platform. Social media was buzzing with hashtag Justice for Marcus hashtags, and his phone showed 247 missed calls from reporters, supporters, and people claiming to represent everyone from movie producers to book publishers. But it was a call from Dr. Blake at 6:30 a.m. that cut through all the noise and brought Marcus crashing back to the dangerous reality of what they were facing. "Marcus, we need to meet immediately." Dr. Blake's voice was tight with an urgency Marcus had never heard before. "Something happened last night that changes everything." An hour later, Marcus found himself back in the downtown conference room, but the atmosphere was completely different from his previous visits. Dr. Blake looked like he hadn't slept. Sarah Chun was pacing nervously by the windows, and Attorney Martinez was on 3 different phone calls simultaneously, her voice sharp with legal urgency. David Park, the computer specialist, looked up from his laptop with an expression that mixed anger and concern. "Marcus, someone broke into my apartment last night. Professional job. They knew exactly what they were looking for." Marcus felt his stomach drop. What did they take? Every hard drive, every backup device, every piece of physical evidence related to our investigation. David's voice was controlled, but Marcus could see the fury burning in his eyes. 5 months of work gone. Sarah Chin stopped pacing and turned to face Marcus. "That's not all. Someone also broke into my home office and took my research files. Same professional approach. Nothing else was touched, no signs of random burglary. They wanted our evidence specifically." Dr. Blake leaned forward, his expression grave. "Marcus, what happened last night wasn't random crime. It was a coordinated effort to destroy our investigation before it could do any more damage to the people we've exposed. But we still have copies, right? Backup files in the cloud, digital records." David shook his head grimly. They were very thorough. My cloud accounts were hacked and wiped. My email servers were compromised. Even my phone was remotely accessed and cleared. Whoever did this had resources and technical expertise that go way beyond what a private investigator or standard corporate security team could provide. Attorney Martinez finished her phone calls and joined the conversation. I've been in contact with the FBI's Cybercrimes Division. What happened to David and Sarah shows sophisticated coordination and federal-level technical capabilities. This isn't Senator Whitmore operating alone anymore. This is a network with serious resources and the willingness to use them. Marcus felt the walls of the conference room closing in around him. Are you saying we lost everything? Not everything, Dr. Blake replied, his voice carrying a note of grim satisfaction. The evidence we turned over to law enforcement is safe, and Sarah's editors at the Washington Post still have their copies of the original story materials. But our ability to prove the broader conspiracy, to document all 47 cases Jennifer's group brought forward, that's been severely compromised. Sarah Chun sat down heavily in her chair. There's something else, Marcus. This morning I received a call from someone claiming to represent a consortium of concerned parties who suggested that my continued reporting on this story could be detrimental to my career and personal safety. They threatened you? Not directly. It was all very polite, very professional. But the message was clear: back off or face consequences. Dr. Blake stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the Chicago skyline with the expression of someone calculating odds and risks. Marcus, I need to be completely honest with you about what we're facing now. The people behind this corruption scheme have decided that discrediting the evidence isn't enough. They're willing to engage in criminal activity to protect themselves. What does that mean for the investigation? It means we're not just fighting corruption anymore. We're fighting people who are willing to break the law to cover up their crimes. And that makes everyone in this room, including you, a potential target. Marcus felt a chill run down his spine. Target for what? Attorney Martinez answered. Harassment, intimidation, maybe worse. These people have already committed burglary and cybercrimes. There's no reason to think they'll stop there if they feel sufficiently threatened. David Park looked up from his laptop again. There's one more thing. The hack of my systems wasn't just about stealing our evidence. They also took personal information about everyone involved in the investigation. Your address, your mother's work schedule, your sister's school. They know everything about your family, Marcus. The implications hit Marcus like a physical blow. It was one thing to accept personal risks in the name of justice, but the idea that his family might be in danger because of his decisions was almost unbearable. We need to stop, Marcus said, his voice barely above a whisper. If my family could get hurt because of this, we need to stop right now. Dr. Blake turned back from the window. Marcus, I understand that impulse, and no one would blame you for choosing to protect your family. But I need you to understand something. Stopping now won't make you safe. What do you mean? These people have already committed serious crimes to cover up their corruption. You and your family are witnesses to that. Walking away from the investigation doesn't change the fact that you know what they've done. Sarah Chin nodded grimly. Dr. Blake is right. We've already crossed a line from inconvenient witnesses to active threats. The only real safety comes from exposing everything and ensuring that these people face consequences for what they've done. Marcus felt trapped between two impossible choices. Continue fighting and risk his family's safety, or surrender and still face potential retaliation from people who had already shown they were willing to break the law. What do you recommend? Dr. Blake sat back down, his expression serious but determined. We accelerate everything. We take the evidence we still have, we coordinate with law enforcement to ensure maximum protection, and we go public with everything immediately. The longer this drags out, the more time they have to plan additional attacks. And my family? Full protection. I've already arranged for a security firm to provide round-the-clock monitoring of your home, your mother's workplace, and your sister's school. It's not ideal, but it's necessary until the situation is resolved. Marcus thought about his mother, who had worked so hard to build a stable life for her children, now needing bodyguards because her son had chosen to fight for justice. He thought about his sister, who would have to deal with the knowledge that dangerous people might wish her harm. Dr. Blake, can I ask you something? Of course. When you decided to help me, did you know it would lead to this? Dr. Blake was quiet for a long moment, considering the question with the gravity it deserved. I hoped it wouldn't, but I knew it was possible. Marcus, When you challenge entrenched power, when you threaten systems that have been generating wealth and privilege for decades, you inevitably face people who have a lot to lose and the resources to fight dirty. Do you regret getting involved? Never. Not for a second. Dr. Blake's voice carried absolute conviction. What I regret is that it took this long for someone to stand up to these people. Every day we allowed this corruption to continue, more deserving students had their futures stolen. Saracen leaned forward. Marcus, there's something else you should know. Since the press conference yesterday, we've received over 200 new reports from students and families who believe they were victims of scholarship fraud. 200 more cases, going back 15 years. The scope of it was staggering. Hundreds of students, thousands of family members, millions of dollars in stolen educational opportunities. The corruption Marcus had stumbled into was vast, systematic, and had been operating with impunity for over a decade. If we stop now, Marcus said slowly, all of those people stay victims forever. That's right, Dr. Blake confirmed. And the people who victimize them continue operating without consequences, probably getting bolder and more brazen over time. Marcus stood up and walked to the window, looking down at the city streets where normal people were going about their normal lives, unaware that a battle for the integrity of American education was being fought in conference rooms and back alleys. When he turned back to face the room, Marcus felt a familiar sense of clarity settling over him. The same feeling he'd had when deciding to accept Dr. Blake's scholarship, the same certainty that had led him to go public with his story. What do we need to do? Dr. Blake smiled for the first time that morning. We need to be smarter, faster, and more coordinated than they are. We need to use their escalation against them, show the world that these people are so corrupt, so desperate to protect their system, that they're willing to commit crimes to silence their victims. Attorney Martinez opened her briefcase and pulled out a thick folder. I've been in contact with federal prosecutors who are very interested in this case. The burglaries, the cyber attacks, the intimidation, those are federal crimes that carry serious penalties. If we can connect those crimes to specific individuals in the corruption network, we can bring down the entire operation. Saracen was already pulling up files on her laptop. I've been working on a follow-up story that documents the escalation, the criminal behavior, the systematic nature of the cover-up. But I need more sources, more witnesses willing to go on the record. You'll have them, Marcus said with conviction. Jennifer Walsh and her coalition, the 200 new cases, everyone who's been hurt by this system. If we're doing this, we're doing it right. David Park cracked his knuckles over his keyboard, and I've been working on something special, a way to trace the digital fingerprints of whoever hacked my systems. If they thought they were covering their tracks, they underestimated what a really motivated computer scientist can accomplish. Dr. Blake stood up, and Marcus could see the strategic mind that had built a successful company shifting into high gear. Then we have our plan. Full transparency, maximum pressure, coordinated action across multiple fronts. We make it impossible for them to attack us individually by presenting a united front that's too big and too public to intimidate. How long do we have? Marcus asked. If we're going to do this, we need to move fast, Attorney Martinez replied. Every day we delay gives them more time to plan additional attacks or find ways to discredit our remaining evidence. Then let's not give them that time, Marcus said. Let's end this. As the meeting broke up and plans began to accelerate around him, Marcus felt a strange sense of peace despite the danger they were facing. For months, he had been reacting to events beyond his control. The scholarship revocation, the mysterious benefactor, the media attention, the criminal attacks. Now, finally, he was choosing to act rather than simply respond. But Marcus Johnson was about to discover that when you declare war on the most powerful people in the country, they don't just fight back, they fight to destroy you completely. And the next phase of this battle would test not just his courage, but his ability to survive when the entire system turned against him. The coordinated counterattack began exactly 72 hours after Marcus announced his intention to fight back with everything he had. It came from directions he hadn't anticipated, using weapons he hadn't known existed, and it targeted vulnerabilities he hadn't even realized he possessed. The first shot was fired on a Wednesday morning when Marcus arrived at Roosevelt High School to find protesters gathered outside the main entrance. But these weren't supporters rallying to his cause. They were carrying signs that read, "Stop the witch hunt," and merit means more than media manipulation. Marcus recognized some of the faces from the local news, parents of other students, community leaders, even a few teachers from neighboring schools. They weren't random agitators. They were respectable people who had been convinced that Marcus was somehow the villain in this story. Mrs. Patterson met him at a side entrance, her face pale with worry. Marcus, we need to get you inside quickly. These protesters have been here since 6 a.m., and the media is having a field day with it. As they hurried through the hallways, Mrs. Patterson explained what had happened overnight. Someone has been calling parents, community leaders, anyone with influence in the education system. They're telling people that your investigation is damaging the reputation of merit-based scholarships and making it harder for other deserving students to get funding. That doesn't make any sense, Marcus protested. We're trying to protect merit-based scholarships from corruption. I know that, and you know that, but these people are being told a very different story. They're hearing that you're a publicity-seeking student who's trying to tear down the scholarship system because you didn't get the award you wanted. Marcus felt sick. The corruption network wasn't just stealing evidence and making threats. They were systematically turning the community against him using carefully crafted misinformation. The situation got worse during lunch period when Marcus received a call from his mother that made his blood run cold. "Baby, you need to come home right now." Sandra's voice was tight with controlled panic. "Someone called my supervisor at the diner and told him that I was under investigation for welfare fraud. They suspended me pending a full review of my financial records." Marcus felt the world tilting around him. "Mama, that's impossible. We've never received welfare payments." "I know that, you know that, but now I have to prove it. They want 5 years of tax returns, bank statements, everything. And Marcus, I can't afford to miss work while they conduct this investigation." The cruelty of it was breathtaking. The corruption network had found the Johnson family's greatest vulnerability, their precarious financial situation, and weaponized it against them. Even if Sandra was eventually cleared of all charges, the investigation would cost her income they couldn't afford to lose. By the time Marcus got home that afternoon, the attack had expanded to include his sister. Maya, who was in 8th grade, had been called to the principal's office and questioned about her brother's activities. Other students were asking her why Marcus was trying to ruin college scholarships for everyone else. "Marcus, I don't understand what's happening," Maya said, tears streaming down her face. "Kids at school are saying you're lying about everything, that you're just mad because you weren't good enough to get a real scholarship." Marcus pulled his little sister into a hug, feeling the weight of responsibility crushing down on him. His decision to fight for justice had turned his family into targets, and now even children were being used as weapons against him. That evening, Dr. Blake called an emergency meeting, but this time they met at his private office rather than the downtown conference room. The atmosphere was grim as the team assessed the scope of the coordinated attack they were facing. "It's sophisticated and well-funded," Attorney Martinez reported, spreading documents across Dr. Blake's conference table. "They've hired multiple PR firms, opposition research specialists, and legal teams. This isn't just damage control. It's a systematic campaign to destroy Marcus's credibility and turn public opinion against the entire investigation." Sarah Chin was furious. "They're using classic disinformation tactics. Create confusion about who the real victims are, muddy the waters with false accusations, and turn the community against the whistleblower. It's textbook stuff, and it's working." David Park had spent the day analyzing the digital aspect of the attack. The social media campaign is particularly well coordinated. They've got bot networks spreading negative stories about Marcus, fake accounts posing as concerned parents, and a sophisticated system for amplifying any criticism while suppressing supportive voices. Dr. Blake looked older than Marcus had ever seen him. They're not just trying to win this battle. They're trying to send a message to anyone else who might consider challenging their system. They want to make an example of Marcus that will terrify other potential whistleblowers. "So what do we do?" Marcus asked, though part of him already knew the answer would involve difficult choices and greater risks. "We accelerate our timeline," Attorney Martinez replied. "The longer this drags out, the more damage they can do to your reputation and your family. We need to present our evidence to federal prosecutors immediately and let law enforcement take the lead." Sarah Chun nodded in agreement. "And I need to publish the follow-up story now, before they can completely control the narrative. Once the FBI's involvement becomes public, it'll be much harder for them to dismiss this as a personal vendetta." But it was Dr. Blake who voiced the hard truth that everyone was thinking. "Marcus, you need to understand that even if we win, even if we expose all the corruption and bring these people to justice, your life will never be the same. They've made sure of that." "What do you mean?" "I mean that fighting back against this kind of power always comes with a permanent cost. Your name will forever be associated with this controversy. Some people will always believe their version of events rather than the truth. And there will always be those who see you as someone who brought down respected institutions rather than someone who exposed corruption." Marcus thought about his mother, suspended from her job for crimes she never committed. He thought about his sister, crying because her classmates had been turned against her family. He thought about the protesters outside his school, convinced that he was somehow the villain in a story where he had been the original victim. Are you saying I should quit? I'm saying you should understand the full cost of continuing, Dr. Blake replied gently. Once we take the next step, once we involve federal law enforcement and make this a national scandal, there's no going back to your old life. Marcus walked to the window of Dr. Blake's office, looking out at the Chicago skyline where lights were beginning to twinkle in the gathering dusk. Somewhere out there, Jennifer Walsh and her Merit Defense Coalition were waiting to see if he would continue to fight for their cause. Somewhere out there, hundreds of other students who had been victimized by scholarship fraud were looking to him for leadership and hope. And somewhere out there, powerful people were celebrating what they believed was their successful intimidation of a teenager who had dared to challenge their corrupt system. When Marcus turned back to face the room, his voice was steady and determined. Dr. Blake, you asked me once what kind of person I wanted to be. I want to be the kind of person who doesn't let bullies win, no matter how powerful they are or how much damage they can do, even if it costs you everything. Even then, because if I let them destroy me, they'll do the same thing to the next student who tries to stand up to them. And eventually, no one will be willing to fight back at all. Dr. Blake smiled, and Marcus could see pride and sadness mixed in his expression. Then we fight back with everything we have. What's our next move? Attorney Martinez was already reaching for a phone. I call the FBI and schedule a meeting for tomorrow morning. We turn over everything we have and let federal law enforcement take the lead on the criminal aspects of this case. Sarah Chin was typing on her laptop, and I file my follow-up story tonight. By tomorrow morning, the whole country will know that this corruption scheme has escalated to criminal behavior to silence its victims. David Park cracked his knuckles over his keyboard, and I release everything I've discovered about the digital attacks. If they want to play dirty with technology, they're about to learn what a real computer scientist can accomplish. Dr. Blake stood up, his expression resolute, and I start making phone calls to every contact I have in media, politics, and business. It's time for people to choose sides publicly. They can stand with merit and integrity, or they can defend corruption and intimidation. As the meeting broke up and battle plans crystallized around him, Marcus felt a strange sense of calm, despite the storm that was about to break. He had made his choice, accepted the consequences, and committed to seeing this fight through to whatever end awaited. But Marcus Johnson had no idea that his enemies had prepared one final, devastating attack that would test not just his courage, but a capacity to survive when everything he had ever cared about was systematically destroyed. The war for soul of American education was about to reach its climax, and the casualties would be higher than anyone had imagined. You know, there are moments in every great story when a hero has to choose between safety and doing what's right, between protecting themselves and protecting others. Marcus Johnson had reached that moment, and his choice would echo far beyond his own life. If you're on the edge of your seat wondering how this incredible true story unfolds, if you're feeling the same mixture of anger and admiration that Marcus's courage inspires, then you absolutely must subscribe to this channel right now and click the notification bell. Because what happens next will challenge everything you think you know about justice, power, and the price of standing up for what's right. And remember that exclusive email newsletter I mentioned? This is exactly the kind of story where we dive deep into the real-world implications, the behind-the-scenes strategies, the personal costs that don't make it into the headlines. Check the description for that link, because what we reveal there will give you a completely new understanding of how these battles really work in America today. Because Marcus Johnson's fight was about to become something none of them had expected. A test case for whether ordinary people can still defeat extraordinary corruption, even when the entire system turns against them. The final act of this incredible story is coming, and you won't believe how it ends.